Welcome back to another episode of 3x3Hustle Hype, and I am absolutely thrilled to introduce my next two guests, current teammates of the Hustle circuit, and that is Tom Wright and Andrew Steele, now 4 and 5 ranked players in the 3x3 players in Australia, but former both number one ranked players of the FIBA 3x3 rankings. Good morning to you, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Very good, not too bad, mate.
Yeah, good to be here.
You can't speak at the same time, so if you want to put up your hand, I know for our podcast they don't. But gentlemen, how are we doing? Are you both in Victoria? Unfortunately, we understand the circumstance of the world. Tommy, to you first. Obviously, it's a very interesting time in the world. How have you dealt with the pandemic?
It's been tough. It's a long time since actually playing some competitive basketball. So I think it's everyone in Victoria, it's kind of weighing on us a little bit at the moment. I mean, back in the last event was the second Pro Hustle in March. And that's the last time that I've been in a basketball stadium, which is crazy to think about. It's so long, September now and 6 months. It's kind of been a different world. So it's kind of getting through it. Hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but trying to stay sane and just itching to get back out there.
Still, in that regard, right, we were supposed to be playing you guys played a makeshift Grand Prix event, playing 7 games in one day. Could you see yourself that 6 months later, that was going to be your last event after, I guess, the excitement, winning Moomba? I mean, you guys won the Grand Prix. Reflecting on it now, what's the emotion in that regard that was your last event for the year?
Yeah, well, it's like 2020 was supposed to be set up to be a really big year for us. Like we were looking at, it was an Olympic year. I mean, obviously we found out that wasn't going ahead, but, we'd qualified for a few challenges. We were set up with a team that was ready to go over there and compete. So it was supposed to be a massive year for us. And then, pandemic came along and just said, not happening.
Put it lightly. It is though. It is. Even obviously they played the last 3 events in Hungary, my hometown, and even like there's a hint of jealousy because I'm like, wow, they get to have the opportunity to play 3 tournaments in 3 weeks. But you're right. Like I had sort of set aside. Obviously, you guys were playing for Nuttawading, but like I was sort of tailoring this year to be a big year in the 3x3 circuit. Tommy, I'll go to you first. I mean, obviously, how have you? I mean, you were going to play for Nuttawading. You were set to defend the NBL crown. Were you the MVP of the grand final series?
I'd like to think so, but no. Yeah. But thanks for throwing that in there.
But like, has the motivation? You've obviously stayed in good nick. You are. I mean, I can look at you right now, and you look sensational. But otherwise, for being on reality TV shows, I mean, how have you stayed? I guess both prepared physically and mentally in these last few months.
I think it is tough. Like you go through waves. Initially, you think it's going to be a couple of weeks. Like we got shut down from NBL 1, thinking it might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Who knows how long it's going to be? Season gets cancelled. You kind of go into a different mode. You just kind of maybe it's a taste of retirement in a couple of years for me. Like what it's going to be like when you don't have that competitive outlet and you're not loving being on the court every day and you move into a different stage of life. But for me personally, I've been pretty lucky because my wife Izzy is going into a WNBL season, so being able to still have that kind of outlet and being able to train with her a little bit and going down to the local court and trying to get a bit of exercise in has been good, but kind of channeling that through her has been fantastic. And I think without that I would have gone a bit crazy, but having that big year like you guys talked about, we were hopefully going to defend our title in NBL 1. I mean, I like to think that we're still reigning champions, 2-year reigning champions.
Absolutely. The longest tenured champions in the world.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say back to back, but I'll say reigning champs. But yeah, and then all the hopefully the big tournaments we're going to play in this year for 3x3. I think for me, it's just trying to keep that motivation and stay positive and know that eventually it's going to get there. But whether it's kind of early next year, mid next year, even later, it's just kind of yet to be determined.
Stilo, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I found it, during the first lockdown, it was a lot easier to stay motivated because you saw, a pretty good end goal. Like, there was some events coming up. The NBL had this great idea about this, sort of indoor film studio event that was going to come up. And
that was a secret, but I mean, yeah, that was.
But there, during this second lockdown, it's been a lot harder to stay motivated. Like, there's so much going on in the world, and you're just like, well, basketball's, a nice hobby, but it's not the be all end all. So when things come back and, come back into it, then yeah, I'm sure that the passion and all that drive will come back.
Now, the beginning. How the heck did you guys both get into 3x3? I think you've been playing for a little bit more longer than Tommy, right, Stilo? But I mean, how did you get into the game and yourself, Tom, into this beautiful game we call 3x3?
Yeah, well, I got we both play with Dave Beaver, he coaches us. And yeah, he was the first one to get me involved. Like, I remember it was Asia Cup bid Australia first got about 3 or 4 years ago, wherever it was. And I just got a phone call from Dave Beaver saying, there's this 3-on-3 game that Australia's got a tournament bid for, and we're looking for guys that are going to put their name in the hat and really commit to the sport. And to be honest, I was a little bit unsure about it. Like, I hadn't heard anything about 3-on-3, and the sport sounded quite comical, really. As soon as I started watching it and checking out all the videos, I thought, oh, this is perfect. Like, for someone like me, shooter, defender, I was just like, well, let's give it a go. And yeah, as soon as I started playing, like, that first tournament in Asia Cup was a massive eye opener, and just loved it ever since.
Going back to all of that, I mean, did you even, because you're obviously number one ranked for some time, did you even see that element? You're like, I'm number one ranked player in the world. Like, you can't do that in 5-on-5. Like, and as much as we know, like, say Bryce Cotton's the MVP, there's the argument, like, you're like, well, where's your ranking points? Like, I even say that to my former teammates. I'm like, I'm sorry, but you guys aren't ranked. I'm clearly better in life in general, but now I've actually got a ranking. I mean, when you got the number one ranking, were you like, wow, this is pretty bizarre?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, for anyone else looking out there, they're like, oh, what does that even mean? Like, but like, it actually does mean a lot. Like, when you look at it, and FIBA and all the rankings and how they're changing their like selections as to like key events, like, you've got to have certain, you can pick total number of 2 players or something in the top 10 to go to national events. So it does mean a lot. Yeah.
Tommy, let's talk about that Asia Cup. It was sort of a very, I mean, I love hearing the story, how you guys go to some province in China to play qualifying games, to then, I mean, an incredible feat in winning gold off a miraculous sort of shot by Tommy Garland. Let's talk about that. I mean, how was, that experience? I mean, we talk about the demands of a 3x3 tournament, but perspective, you go into some town, play a few games, and then end up winning gold. Who would have thought a qualifying team could do that? I mean, talk me through that.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I guess that was the first time that I'd represented Australia. So kind of the whole weight of that was was obviously one part of it, but then going to a little kind of provincial city, a couple of hours outside of Shenzhen, I think it was, in China, middle of nowhere, kind of qualifying tournament where all basically the teams that hadn't played a lot of 3x3 had to go to get to the main draw of the Asia Cup. This is 2018 now. It was a crazy experience because you talk about like this whole new sport and kind of the legitimacy of it. And when I kind of had this huge expectation of what I wanted to do representing Australia, and then you kind of match that with the reality of some of the sport. Some of it is like glamorous, massive stadiums in the middle of squares in Amsterdam, and then others just like, small little squash court that hasn't been repaired in 30 years. And, there's, horrible toilets out the back, and the conditions aren't great, and the court, the tiles are messed up. A lot of that, like, courts that you play on are fantastic and they're great quality, but then some of the tournaments you play in are just, a bit rubbish. But it's just the way that the sport is growing, and it's growing so rapidly that people are really getting involved and loving it. But having to go through like 5 games in a couple of days, win all of those to get through to the main draw, and then going into our like first main draw in Shenzhen, in this huge, massive city with this crazy outdoor setup, the chalk and cheese between those two was just incredible. Going from like the base to all the glitz and the glam. And then I think for us, we always knew that we were a good team, that we'd had, quality players, and we played the right way, and we had the skill and the structure, but we just didn't have the experience. And that was a really eye-opening thing for us for the first Asia Cup. And I think we absolutely got lucky. I mean, the Mongolian team in the final had free throws to win it. They kind of, weren't able to capitalize, and then somehow we just got a chance at it and just got, I guess, lucky. Or I guess if you prepare, you do get lucky sometimes, and ended up winning the tournament.
Talk to me about that shot, Steelo, by Tommy Garlop, because I was brand new. I knew you guys won gold, just from social media, and then obviously we watched the whole game, obviously with expert commentary by Tommy the whole game, just telling him when he was really good. But the reaction, like, he hits this, to put in context, he hits a game winner. He didn't have a clue. You can elaborate, but talk to me about the whole reaction of give a little bit of context. You need to win by, like in overtime, it's 1-2. Talk to me about that game winner by Tom Garlop.
The overtime was already like 30 seconds into it. So, that's extraordinarily long for an overtime. Like, people were going up for layups. It was just like tip after tip. I think Mongolia had quite a few goes at it. And, luckily we got the ball in a stop play, and we set up a play, and it was, to get a shooter open. I came off it, had one look at it, was shut down pretty well, and kicked it off to Tom Garlop, who he had a man just sitting right there in his face, but just decided to launch it, and it went in, and he looked stunned for about 2 seconds. I think everyone was just so tired that they just forgot like the whole game being over. And then, once it kicked in, it was celebration mode from then. Stacks on the court.
Did he have a clue, Tommy? Right? Like, did he?
I don't think so. To put into context, like, we forget 3x3 is an outdoor sport, and we're playing in China where it was like 32 degrees at 8 o'clock at night. We'd played 10 games in the space of a couple of days. The humidity was off the charts. The pollution as well was crazy. Like, you could barely breathe out there. And playing 10 games, at the end of it, like, we were all so exhausted. I also think that Tommy Garlop was just like, I don't know if he was spaced out or he just like didn't understand the rules of overtime because we hadn't gone to overtime before. He hit the shot, and then the three of us, like myself, Owen, and Steelo, just went crazy. And he kind of does this little walk, and it's like, oh, yeah, we've had fun, haven't we? And then we just like mobbed him. But just that moment of winning was just crazy. Like all the relief and the joy and everything that just like comes over you. And then the sheer exhaustion of like, yes, we did it. I don't think I stood up for like half an hour because I was so tired. It was pretty crazy.
It is crazy. And you spoke about the elements of like, I guess the extreme lows to like the extreme highs. You're right. Like we're playing at the World Cup, which we'll touch on in Amsterdam, like across the road from the museum plant, and like you're just like, this is unreal, like a purpose-built stadium in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. To then like we're on the way to a 3x3 tournament where the bus driver doesn't know where we're going in China, and they're like, oh, sorry, now the prime minister's here. You're not going to play in the purpose-built stadium the purpose-built court on a shopping center. We're going to put you in a warehouse where, like, as you walk in, there's turtles and fish and whatever you want to buy for lunch, and you struggle to find toilet paper. But that adds to, like, I guess the rawness of 3x3. Like, I feel like, and I feel like you have to be built a bit different because you can't be precious. Like, I think about it. I mean, it's obviously sensational, but you have to embrace that whole element. I mean, and that speaks like, I don't want to say NBL guys would be precious, but I would imagine if I had sent like a few current guys to Mongolia or to a tiny province in China to play 4 games, they'd be like calling their agent and saying, hey, I'm not about that. But I feel like that's what's made you successful, is embracing that scope. Do you agree in that regard? I mean, Steelo, you will embrace culture. I mean, we've eaten in some pretty dingy places. Asked our tour guides to accommodate our like, just surprise us. I mean, what's your mindset going into a tournament and embracing the whole side of it?
Yeah, I think like once you've played a couple of 3-on-3 tournaments, you know that they're not always played in luxurious places with great setups. You're warming up. Sometimes you don't have a practice court. You're shooting around on a makeshift basket that you might find somewhere, or you're doing warm-ups in the middle of a shopping center. You've just got to roll with the punches. And when you do get out there and get the chance to get on the court, like everyone's been in the same boat. Like the people you're playing against are in the same position that you are. Like they've had the same warm-ups, all that sort of stuff, so that there's never really any excuses there. Like you fly in maybe day before the tournament, you hope you get some sleep, you wake up and you got to play the next day, and you might have like 4 games back to back or however long it is. So that's just part and parcel with it. And it's no point you sitting there complaining about, if only I got more chance to warm up, or did, had the physio there to look after me, or blah, blah, blah. You've just got to go with it and just accept that that's what it is, and give it your best shot.
I want to talk about Puerto Rico, Tommy, and let's talk immense pride playing for Australia. We'll touch on this quickly. Talk to me about how that was, knowing you were qualifying for Amsterdam, obviously still keeping the Olympic dream alive, knowing that we had a chance to play at the World Cup at Amsterdam. Talk to me about that, like, and as well as your career, which may have not, you obviously had stints in the NBL, but what was that like qualifying for Puerto Rico and then that experience in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it's kind of surreal. I think, I guess my basketball journey, I never really expected to be there. Like you kind of give it a crack. I gave the NBL a crack when I was younger, didn't really hang around, played C-ball, NBL 1, was kind of like really content with that and moving into a professional career. And then this whole opportunity comes around, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and I just like latched onto it with 2 hands. So to even like be in that situation is something I really wasn't expecting. But then once I had that opportunity, it was pretty crazy. And Puerto Rico kind of sums it up, like opportunity to play in a World Cup, then from a World Cup to potentially qualify for the Olympics is something that you can only really dream of. The tournament itself, you fly 30 hours. I think the amount of time that we traveled was equal to the amount of time we were actually in Puerto Rico. Like we traveled 30 hours there, 30 hours back, and we were only on the ground for like 60 hours or 70 hours or something. It was a crazy schedule, like we just talked about, like the kind of, it's not glamorous at all. But also the adversity that we faced over there. Like we had Steelo go down with an injury in the semi. He was kind of on one leg for the semi and the final, and then playing back-to-back games where you look at like professional teams now, they've got their strength and conditioning, they've got their recovery, they've got their diet, they've got all these like, best practice of how to keep an athlete in shape and kind of performing at their best. 3x3 is not like that. 3x3 is like the epitome of like resilience and trying to struggle and who's just going to be the toughest and who wants it more. So I think at the end of the day, like when we won that like playing game to get to the World Cup and keep that dream alive and know that we were going to Amsterdam to play in a World Cup was just crazy. Yeah, the pure emotion after that moment was I haven't experienced much like that.
Oh, mate, I still get goosebumps now. And you spoke about that, Tommy. Steelo, I mean, you guys are the definition of, I guess, streets to the Olympics, right? I mean, yeah, I've played for 10 years, but you are, like, I mean, from coming there to what it is, like, unheralded players, but now superstars in 3x3, something that you guys should be proud about. The Steelo we spoke about, and it's unless you're in the inner sanctum, people wouldn't really know about that, but was that driving force, like semi-final, yeah, you literally are on one leg and then we had to bring you in like for 3 or 4 seconds because as people know, I get tired. Talk to me about that. Touch on that, what that was. I mean, what were you thinking? I mean, obviously you're a humble guy, but a very selfless guy. Those moments where you're like, this is a chance to the Olympics, when you stood on that court for 4 possessions, which I honestly think won the game because it sort of turned. They could have hit 4 points and back in it, but they attacked you as I would have as well, and you were able to get a couple of key stops, and I guess we ran away after the game.
Yeah, well, it was like probably one of the most emotional roller coasters because 2 games or whatever before when I went down, when you've only got 4 people there. You lose one.
Wasn't ideal.
Not an ideal situation to be in. And for me, like, as the guy who went down, I thought, oh, shit, like do we have to cut that out?
Nah, keep going.
I thought, I've put our team at risk. Like, if we don't make it through, there's a lot of, I'm going to feel responsible for going down and getting injured. And, you have that, you don't try and, it's obviously not your fault that you get injured, but you do associate that as, I've put our team at risk of making the World Cup and not making the Olympics. So all that emotion just comes straight in. And then, when we did finally get through and, I jumped on the court for a few plays, but to be honest, there was no decision there. Like I would do everything I could to make sure that the team got across the line. And, when we did finally get there, just the sheer relief that, that injury didn't cause anything, and we got it done. Like it was amazing. Like way more props to you guys getting it done with 3 players, but if I could help out wherever I can, that'd be,
There's a really funny photo from the end of that game where I think there's myself, you, Greg, and then Timmy Conrad, just grabbing each other, screaming and yelling, and then you see Steelo in the background just hobbling towards us trying to celebrate, and he's like clearly can't walk properly, but somehow he played a couple of possessions in that game.
It is. Yeah, I mean, you put it likely. It was an unbelievable feat to be able to do that. I remember it's my very first, I guess, significant tournament. And I remember as you went down, we were playing Puerto Rico in the semis. So I was like, all right, let's just give it an absolutely almighty crack. And we gave ourselves a chance. And then I was like, we're going to have to back this up in 30 minutes. Like, I don't know if this is possible, but no, it's amazing. And that's what they go. Look, I want to lastly touch on, fellas, obviously I do believe, you know, you're your staples of the 3x3 circuit here in Australia. Obviously you've won, you know, significant amount of 3x3 Hustle tournaments, and we've seen that you've featured in Challengers and Sydney and all that regard. How have you seen the progression in the last couple of years, obviously being involved from the get-go? And from that way, where do you see, I guess, that pathways model really going to continue developing the sport in Australia? Tommy?
I think it's taken leaps and bounds since its initial conception. I think number one, from like an exposure point of view, so many more people know about the sport now. There's so many more eyes on it, so many more high quality players, grassroots players, all the way through to kind of your top tier. So it's great to see, and I think it's only going to go much further in the next couple of years. I guess from where, you know, Australia is always going to be limited in its geography. Like, this sport is kind of Europe and Asian centric, but just because they can hold so many more tournaments. So being able to build up like a quality local network of tournaments, which is currently being built up, and I know a focus of the NBL Hustle, is only going to make us better. We've already had some pretty good success on the world stage and sending a couple of different teams over to Challengers and World Tours, and I can only see it getting better. Hopefully I'm still around in a couple of years to see it get to that stage and the body doesn't break down. It is a pretty tough sport, but yeah, super excited to see where it goes.
Still, I want to touch on this because I think in the back of my mind there's this like other carrot as well. You're right. Like, I mean, I've retired from professional basketball, and this is the one thing that I'm sort of like, yeah, I'll stay in relatively good nick to do that. And I think that's the Birmingham Games, Commonwealth Games. And where do you see that as a, you know, how do we continue building that pathway? Obviously, hopefully us three feature in it. If not, I'll be quite upset. I'll just wrap up this podcast and say, what a waste of time. But in all seriousness, is that a carrot for yourself? And how do we develop that junior pathway so that, yeah, the men's team feature in the next Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment, like this year has been a bit of it's been a write-off. Like, it's, you know, we're all focused towards that Commonwealth Games goal, but sometimes, you know, you've just got to put things on hold and just, you know, focus on just getting through your current time. So that's kind of how it's been for me. Like, I've got these long-term goals, but I'm just keen to get out there and actually be able to get out of the house and play some basketball. So I'm just going to take baby steps at the moment, and hopefully 2021 is, you know, these opportunities that are out there, you know, 3x3 Hustle events, international challenges, all that kind of stuff resumes back to, you know, the normal status quo. Like, I know that there's some really, you know, exciting events in the pathway. We just got to find our way through this period, and then, yeah, it's back on track. So I think for me, the 2021 or, you know, 2022 Commonwealth Games, like, it's going to be a pretty fierce competition. I think, you know, there'll be a lot more Australians that sort of throw their hat into the ring. But 3x3 is one of those sports that you can't just grab it straight away and understand the game. Like, you've got to put yourself through the paces. You've got to have the experience. And, you know, that's where a lot of those European teams, like, you go against those guys and you say, oh, well, you know, they're 40 years old and how are they still playing the game? But they've just got so much experience and so much knowledge. And, you know, building on that is kind of where I'm focusing my attention, just purely playing. Yeah.
Awesome. Lads, obviously always a pleasure speaking to you, and it's been some time. It's great to see your face because I was upset. We share incredible banter and humour, and it's something that we weren't afford to. That's what I've missed, just being able to engage with you guys. So appreciate your time as always. I know, Tommy, you're a very busy man, so we've got to say goodbye to you. You've obviously ruined how we could speak for all day, but otherwise, lads, really appreciate it. Hopefully, it's good in the near or immediate future. Otherwise, to everyone else, please check us out on 3x3 Hustle Hype on all of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And to you, gentlemen, have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having us.